The night I discovered what was hiding in the walls of the old house on Maple Street, I had no idea what kind of terror I was about to unleash. It all started when I moved to Willow Creek, a small town tucked away in the middle of nowhere. I had just gotten a new job at a local diner and needed a place to stay. The house was cheap, which should have been my first red flag, but I didn't think much of it at the time. The house itself was ancient. I didn't know much about its history, but the locals always referred to it with a kind of dark reverence. People spoke of it in whispers like it was cursed, but I chalked it up to small-town superstition. I was here to live, not to worry about ghost stories. The first few days were normal, but on the fourth night, things started to feel wrong. I had just finished cleaning the diner and headed back to the house when I noticed something strange. The street was unusually quiet. Not a single car, not even a dog barking in the distance. I shook it off. Maybe it was just late, but as I walked up the cracked front steps of the house, I could have sworn I heard something tapping. At first, I thought it was just the wind, or maybe a branch knocking against the window, but it was rhythmic, almost like a knock. I hesitated at the door, my hand on the knob. I thought about turning around, but something pushed me forward. I stepped inside, and the smell hit me immediately. Stale air, like something had been locked up for far too long. The creaky wooden floors groaned under my weight as I walked through the narrow hallway. It was then that I heard it again, the tapping, but this time it was coming from the walls. I froze in place, my heartbeat pounding in my ears. The house was old, sure, but it wasn't supposed to sound like this. It was a steady, rhythmic tapping, like something was moving in the walls, scratching and clawing at the thin plaster. I took a deep breath and forced myself to move toward the source, my nerves on edge. The hallway felt longer than usual that night. The dim light from the single bulb above barely illuminated the dark corners, and the walls seemed to close in around me as I stepped closer to the sound. It was louder now, unmistakable, like something was tapping with purpose. I reached the living room and it stopped. Dead silence. For a moment, I thought I might have imagined it. Maybe it was just my mind playing tricks on me. But as I stood there, trying to calm my racing thoughts, a soft, low thud came from behind the wall to my left. My breath caught in my throat. This wasn't normal. I backed up slowly, my eyes glued to the wall where the sound had come from. I needed to get out of there. I turned and was about to head for the front door when I saw something that stopped me cold. A figure, a shadow in the corner of the room. I'm not sure how I didn't see it earlier. It was dark, but it was there, just standing still, watching me. The longer I stared at it, the more I could make out. Its shape was tall and thin, its limbs stretched unnaturally long. I could feel its eyes on me, though I couldn't see its face. I spun around and bolted for the door, not daring to look back. My mind screamed at me to leave, to run and never come back. But as I reached for the door, it wouldn't budge. The tapping started again. This time it was faster, erratic, like something was frantically trying to escape. I struggled with the door handle, but it felt like something was holding it shut from the other side. The air grew colder, and I could see my breath in the dim light. And then, as if the house itself was alive, I heard it, the whisper. "You shouldn't have come back." I staggered back from the door, my pulse pounding in my throat. The whisper was so clear, so chilling. I could almost feel the cold breath on the back of my neck. My heart raced, and I felt my hands go clammy as I gripped the door handle again, pulling with all my might. But it wouldn't open. The coldness in the room deepened, suffocating me, wrapping itself around my chest like a vice. And then, as if the house had a mind of its own, the whisper came again, louder this time. "You shouldn't have come back." I looked around, trying to find where the voice was coming from, but all I saw were the peeling walls, the shadows stretching unnaturally long across the floor. My feet felt heavy, as if the floor itself was trying to drag me down into the earth. I finally let go of the door handle and backed away. That's when I noticed the wallpaper. The old, faded floral print was peeling away in strange patches, revealing something behind it. A faint shape, like symbols, scratched into the wood beneath. It wasn't random. They were deliberate, scrawled by something with too many hands. I couldn't take my eyes off the wall, and despite every fiber of my being telling me to leave, I stepped closer. My fingers trembled as I gently touched the exposed wood. The moment my skin made contact, the tapping stopped, and a low rumble reverberated through the walls, shaking the floor beneath me. I turned around to run, but before I could take another step, the door to the living room slammed shut with a deafening bang, locking me inside. Panic surged, and I sprinted to the back window, only to find it sealed tight, like the entire house was trapping me, holding me prisoner. And then I heard it, the footsteps. Heavy, deliberate, slow. Someone, or something, was walking through the house, just beyond the walls, keeping pace with me. I could hear the footsteps moving closer, the sound of nails scraping against wood, as if it were crawling its way toward me. Suddenly, there was a loud crash from above. The ceiling groaned, and debris rained down onto the floor. I looked up just in time to see the figure, standing in the doorway. It was the same shadow I'd seen earlier, but now it was solid, tangible, and its face. It was no longer hidden. It was a grotesque, distorted face. Hollow eyes, skin stretched too tight over its skull, its mouth open in a silent scream. I wanted to scream, but I couldn't. The whisper returned, louder now, a guttural sound that filled the room. "You should have left when you had the chance." And then, with one terrifying step, the figure moved forward. I stumbled back, my legs weak beneath me, but the figure moved so fast. It felt as though it had been standing right in front of me all along. Its eyes locked on mine, cold, hollow, and unblinking. The room grew darker, the air heavier, and I felt my breath becoming shallow, like the very atmosphere was crushing the life out of me. I wanted to scream, to shout for help, but nothing came out. My voice was frozen in my throat, choked by the overwhelming terror flooding my chest. It took another step forward, its long, skeletal fingers reaching toward me. For a moment, I thought it was going to touch me, but instead, it stopped just inches from my face. And then, it tilted its head like it was studying me, like it was trying to decide whether to let me live or take me. The house creaked, and I felt the entire structure shift beneath my feet. It wasn't just the floorboards. The house was alive, breathing, shifting, warping around me. My mind was screaming for me to run, but my body refused to move. The tapping was back, louder now, all around me, as if the walls themselves were closing in. I looked around desperately, searching for an escape, but the only thing I saw was the door behind me, the one that had slammed shut on its own. I had to get out of here. With a surge of adrenaline, I lunged at the door handle again, my hands shaking violently. It was no use. The door wouldn't budge. The whispering grew louder, echoing off the walls, the floor, the ceiling, until it felt like the entire house was speaking to me. And then, just as I thought I couldn't take it anymore, the figure spoke. Its voice was like nails on a chalkboard, scraping, hollow, and filled with rage. "You don't belong here." I turned, panic clawing at my chest. My eyes darted around, searching for something, anything, that could help me escape. But there was nothing. The figure was coming closer again, its long, bony hands stretching toward me, its fingers now tipped with sharp, jagged claws. I looked up at the ceiling, and that's when I saw it, the hole. A small gap where the roof had begun to cave in. It was my only chance. I didn't think. I just ran. I ran as fast as I could, diving toward the hole, my arms reaching up, desperate to grab onto anything that might help me climb. I didn't hear the figure's footsteps behind me anymore, but I knew it was there, close, too close. As my fingers found the edge of the hole, I pulled myself up, feeling my hands slip as I fought to escape the hell that had been waiting for me inside this house. But as I looked down, I saw the figure standing beneath me, its hollow eyes staring up at me with pure malice. And then, a final whisper, so soft I almost didn't hear it. "It's too late." In that moment, I understood. I wasn't just escaping the house. The house had already claimed me. There was no getting out. I couldn't escape what had followed me home. I scrambled, my hands slick with sweat, my heart pounding in my throat as I clawed my way up toward the hole. The figure below didn't move. It just stood there, watching me with that chilling, hollow stare, its mouth twitching as if it were about to speak again. But I didn't wait to hear it. With one final desperate heave, I pulled myself through the gap in the ceiling, tumbling into the attic. The air was thick with dust, and I could barely breathe. The room was dim, lit only by the faint moonlight that filtered through a small window in the far corner. For a moment, I thought I might have made it. Maybe I had escaped. But the moment I stood up, I heard it, the sound of something heavy scraping against wood. Slowly, I turned around. The attic was no sanctuary. The walls were covered in old furniture, broken chairs, an ancient dresser, and countless boxes that hadn't been touched in years. But that wasn't what caught my attention. It was the door on the far side of the room. It hadn't been there before. I would have sworn it wasn't there when I first came in. The door was old, covered in rotting wood, the edges crumbling like the rest of the house. And there, in the small crack of the door, I could hear something moving, scratching, tapping, almost like it was calling me. My instinct screamed at me to leave, to find a way out of this place, to run far, far away. But my feet didn't move. I found myself walking toward that door, my legs not responding to the frantic, panic thoughts racing through my head. Before I could stop myself, I reached out and grasped the doorknob. It was cold to the touch, far colder than anything in the house had been before. My hand shook as I turned it. The door creaked open, the sound of old hinges groaning under the strain. What I saw on the other side froze me in place. A small, narrow staircase led down into the dark, deeper into the bowels of the house. The air was thick with an unnatural, suffocating smell, like something long dead had been left to rot beneath the floorboards. And at the bottom of the stairs was a figure, not the same one as before. This one was smaller, hunched over, crouched low like it had been waiting for me. Its face was barely visible in the darkness, but I could see its pale, twisted hands gripping the railing, its fingers too long, too sharp. It didn't speak. It didn't move. It just stared at me with eyes that gleamed like polished stone, cold and empty. I should have closed the door. I should have run, but I couldn't. My body betrayed me again. I stepped forward, drawn to the staircase, unable to stop myself. The whispers grew louder, filling my ears. The walls trembled. The house itself groaned with an unsettling, horrible life. And then I heard it, the faintest, most terrifying laugh, so soft, so faint, it was almost impossible to hear. But I heard it. It was coming from the thing at the bottom of the stairs. It wasn't laughing at me, though. It was laughing with me. It knew I was already trapped. The whispering returned, but now it wasn't just words. It was a sentence, clear and final. "You're mine now." Couldn't breathe. My body froze, every instinct telling me to run, but my legs wouldn't obey. The thing at the bottom of the stairs hadn't moved, but its presence seemed to grow, pressing in on me, suffocating me. The dark, narrow staircase twisted down into the unknown, beckoning me, as if the house itself were calling me to it. I tried to turn back, but my feet were like lead, my body heavy and uncooperative. Every step I took felt like I was sinking deeper into the earth. The walls of the staircase stretched endlessly, the wood creaking beneath my weight as I descended. I couldn't hear anything except for the sound of my own breath, shallow and ragged. And then, from behind me, a cold gust of wind swept through the narrow passageway. It hit me with such force that I stumbled, almost falling down the stairs. I whipped around, and for the first time since I'd entered this house, I saw the figure at the top of the stairs, its pale face now fully visible. It wasn't human. It never had been. Its skin was as white as bone, stretched tight over its skull. Its eyes, those hollow, dark eyes, gazed at me with a hunger that I could feel deep in my chest. The thing didn't move, but it didn't have to. Its presence alone was enough to make my skin crawl, but I couldn't move past it. I looked back down at the staircase and realized something worse. The walls on either side of the stairs were now closing in, narrowing in on me, the wood groaning and cracking as if the house were alive. The space between each step grew smaller. The air grew colder. Couldn't breathe. And then, I heard the whisper again. Soft, sweet, and unmistakable. Come closer. I don't know what happened next. I couldn't control my body anymore. I was walking down the stairs. My mind screamed at me to stop, to turn around, to run, but my legs moved on their own, pulling me closer to the thing at the bottom of the stairs. The laughter, low, guttural, and menacing, filled the space around me, came from everywhere, came from the walls, from the shadows, from the depths of the house. It was inescapable. And then, just before I reached the bottom, I saw it. The room. It wasn't a basement. It wasn't a cellar. It was something far worse. A place that had never seen daylight, a place untouched by time. It was covered in symbols, scratches on the walls, in the floors, carved into the beams above. Symbols I recognized even though I couldn't say why. They were ancient, older than the house itself. And they all pointed inward, as if they were directing me to the center of the room. In the middle of it all, there was a table, a dark, blood-stained table. And on that table was a body. It wasn't like any body I'd ever seen. It was mutilated, its limbs twisted in unnatural angles. Its skin was pale, as if the life had been drained from it. But what made it worse, what made my stomach turn, was the fact that it was still alive. Its eyes were wide open, pleading, but no sound came from its mouth. I wanted to look away, to run, to scream, but I couldn't. My feet were glued to the floor, my body frozen in place. The whispers rose to a crescendo. You're next. I didn't have time to think. The air was thick with something vile, something old. And just as I thought I might collapse from fear, the thing at the bottom of the stairs finally moved. It was coming toward me, its skeletal hands reaching out, its twisted smile wide and grotesque. And then I heard a voice, my own voice, whispering in my ear, "Run." I don't know how I did it, but suddenly, my body obeyed me again. A surge of adrenaline rushed through my veins, and I ran, faster than I ever had in my life. My feet pounded against the stairs, the house shaking beneath me, as if it were angry that I was trying to escape. I turned back and I saw it. The figure at the bottom of the stairs, its eyes locked onto mine, its hands reaching out like a spider ready to pounce. It didn't speak anymore. It didn't need to. The silence that followed was more terrifying than any whisper, any scream. It was the silence of inevitability. The house itself seemed to be pulling me back, urging me to stay. The walls, the floors, the very air seemed to fight against me as I made my way back up the staircase. But I couldn't stop. I had to get out. I reached the attic, barely able to breathe, my chest tight as I gasped for air. I looked around wildly, searching for another way out. The attic window, my only hope, was just ahead. The wind outside was howling, but I could see the moonlight streaming through the cracks in the boards, illuminating the small escape route I had noticed earlier. I was almost there, but as I moved toward the window, I froze. It was behind me, the figure. It had followed me up the stairs. How could it have moved so quickly? It stood in the doorway, its pale face almost glowing in the dim light of the attic, its smile twisted, inhuman. It didn't need to speak anymore. His presence was enough. In that moment, everything slowed. The air was thick with tension. The house seemed to hold its breath. My mind raced. There had to be a way out. I thought of the window again, but I knew it wouldn't be enough. I would never make it. And then, as if time had stopped completely, the thing spoke. Its voice was low and cold, like it was coming from deep inside the earth. "You are already mine." The words cut through me like a blade, deep into my soul. I could feel my body growing weaker, my strength fading, like something inside me was being drained. The shadows seemed to close in around me, thick and oppressive, and I knew that there was no escaping this. But then, a thought flashed through my mind, something my mother had told me when I was just a child. You can never leave, but you can choose when you let them take you. It was absurd, it made no sense, but it clicked. The power wasn't just in the house. It wasn't just in the figure. It was in me. I still had a choice. With the last ounce of strength I had, I turned toward the window and shoved the broken boards aside. The cold night air hit my face like a slap, and for the first time in what felt like an eternity, I took a deep breath, full of life, full of freedom. I jumped. I don't remember hitting the ground. I don't remember how far I fell, or how long I lay there, dazed. But when I opened my eyes, the house was gone. It wasn't there anymore. The house on Maple Street that had plagued me, that had tormented me, was nothing but a memory, a nightmare in the distance. The town was quiet again, peaceful, as if nothing had ever happened. But I knew better. I don't know if I'll ever truly be free from that house, from that thing that followed me. Sometimes, late at night, I can still hear the whispers, the tapping, the laughter. But for now, I'm still here, alive. And maybe that's the only victory I can claim.